Hey, GW coming to you live on demand. You guys know the rest. Hey, we're going to jump right into VHS 2. I'm going to tell you all about that film and tell you why it's a better sequel, in my opinion, than the original. All right, let's start with the very obvious. It's put out again by Magnet, and it also is in association with Bloody Disgusting, so you guys know if you watch the first film exactly what kind of content you guys are going to get. The directors of this film are Simon Barrett, and returning is Adam Wingard, Greg Hale, Eduardo Sanchez. Now, if you guys don't know him, he was one of the co-writers of the Blair Witch Project, another very successful movie, which I mentioned yesterday in my VHS 1 review. We have a new director who I haven't seen called Timo Gelanto. I think that's how you spell his name. We have Gareth Evans and Jason Eisner. Now, again, like the previous version of VHS, we have one wraparound story and about three or four consecutive stories contained in the videotapes themselves. This time, instead of a group of hooligans breaking into an apartment to steal a videotape, we have two detectives who are searching for a missing kid who hasn't shown up at school. Mom wants them to go check it out. So, surprise, surprise, we go to an abandoned house. Same setup as before, monitors all over the place, VHS tapes, VCRs thrown around the whole place, and we start to uncover the tapes. Now, unlike the first one, the kid who is missing actually decides for himself to create one of these tapes. Apparently, he's very, very obsessed with the morbid content on these videos, and he wants to make another one. The wraparound segment is called Tape 49, and it's directed by Simon Barrett. It's a pretty well done story, not as good as the hooligan one in the first film, but nevertheless, it has a hell of a shocking ending, and it's pretty decent. Again, it contains the creepiness of the first film's wraparound story. It also is a little bit much shorter and a little bit easier to sort of follow, because instead of four guys rummaging through a house, now you have two. Okay, now the first wraparound story, or the first story, the videotape story that you see, is called Clinical Trials. Phase 1 Clinical Trials is the exact title for this. It's directed by Adam Wingard. And it concerns a man who got his eye gashed up in a car accident. And they put an experimental chip in his head, in his eye, so he could see. Upon leaving the clinic, he goes home. He lives in one of these posh LA, overlook places, and he starts seeing weird things, ghosts, if you will. He meets up with another girl who has the same kind of experimental treatment done on her ear so she could actually hear. The story itself is short, terrifying, but the one thing I will say is I don't think this story lasted long enough, but I get it. But again, Adam Wingard does a hell of a good job on this. The intensity level on this is pretty good. The one thing I do like about this is that from the very get-go, this film does waste little time in getting going. And if you've seen the first one, then you know what to expect with the first-person camera, how it judders all over the place. And it really adds, like I said, just like the first one, adds a level of tension, terror, excitement, as again, this film puts you as one of the central characters. This story has a pretty wicked ending, and it starts to, for the first half of the story, there's really no gore. The tail end of the story, the climax of the story, if you will, we see the gore pretty much start to appear in this film. And again, the gore in this film, I would say, is like a domino effect because it starts out with something moderate and then jumps really to the extreme level, but not ever to the level of extreme that the first one was in. But it does have copious amounts of gore. The story direction is pretty good on this. It's short, easy to follow, and very creepy, in my opinion. And the one thing I do like about this story in particular is that 99% of this story is shot in this gentleman's house. And it gives you the feeling that, almost that claustrophobic atmosphere. So, first story, I give it about 3 stars. All right, moving on. The second story is called A Ride in the Park, and it's directed by, you guessed it, Eduardo Sanchez and Greg Hale. Now, as I mentioned before, Eduardo Sanchez was one of the co-creators of the Blair Witch Project. He takes that level of making anything terrifying. In this case, there is a gentleman who's on a bicycle. He has a GoPro, one of those things you stick on your head. Starts riding around. About 2 seconds into his bike ride, he gets attacked by a zombie, then turns into a zombie, and the whole thing escalates into him and a pack of zombies terrorizing a kid's birthday party who is set in, I think it's called Stone National Park or something like that. But anyway, the first person camera work on this is phenomenal, especially since you have the GoPro on this character's head. The gore is pretty ratcheted up in here. We see everything from, skewered eyeball or zombie bites to skewered eyeballs to, shotgun blasts. I mean, it's a riot, and it takes you to the throwback days of Dawn of the Dead and, zombie movies of that nature. The inclusion of the little kids makes this segment much more terrifying because, again, Eduardo Sanchez and Greg Hale, they did a lot with a small location being a bike trail and then woods. The interesting thing about this story is all this guy wants to try to do is take a ride on his bicycle and then go see his girlfriend, and then he ends up having literally one of the worst days in cinema history. I mean, and it's not a paradox, but it's a reminder that you could have a very optimistic day and your day could go south real fast. So I like the comparison there with that. Not a bad story, pretty good actually in the zombie sense. And again, very short, very to the point. A lot of blood in this story, but they kept it short. And the one thing I want to say is that I don't know the actors here by name, but I'll tell you what, they all do a pretty good job. The kids really act scared, which is really good. I mean, they must have been coached. But this story is definitely a throwback to the zombie boom of the early 90s, 70s. And it has enough gore, and I don't remember any zombies in any horror film that I have seen terrorizing a children's birthday party. Now, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a movie out there where they do that, but I haven't seen it. This one's directed pretty good. Very short, very graphic, very to the point. Again, give it 3 stars. And that brings us on to our 4th story, entitled Safe Haven. Now, this was the one I was telling you guys on my last VHS review, the review I did before this about the girls in boarding school. I was pretty much way off. This one ratchets up the gore to about 20, I would think, and it's set in a Japanese compound. Now, what happens in this story is there's a group of reporters who want to gain access to interview the compound leader, who is much like a David Koresh sort of figure. He has a commune. He's got everybody living there. And it's excluded from society. And basically, they're all whack jobs. So, what happens in this film, or in this story rather, is that these guys go into the compound and they bring a reporter with them who happens to be a woman. Upon entering the facility, things happen so fast in these stories that you kind of just go with it. She ends up realizing she's pregnant. She has the daughter or the son of Satan. Giant monster, goat head, pentagram, the whole 9 yards. But the commune is, as soon as that gets to fruition, they're a doomsday cult. So they decide to kill themselves off, come back as zombies. This film, like I just said, this story ratchets up the gore to about 10, 20. There's elements in here of, like, some of the first person camera work is almost like a first person shooter game, in the fact that, it's just the set pieces are pretty good in this. And again, this film is mostly 99% isolated to the compound, and it gives them a large variety to do that. We see everything in this story from mass suicides to, heads being blown off, dudes being shot, wall executions. I mean, it's crazy. This story, again, more than anything in this film, is the one that you'll remember, because it plays out a little bit longer than the rest of them. And the gentleman who plays the cult leader, or the commune leader, is a very sick and disturbed individual, and that's why you'll remember the story. You'll also remember this story because in the first VHS, you had a gargoyle vampire demon thing. I don't even know. This one, you have this monster, and this monster is memorable because it is the only monster demon in the film. The next story deals with aliens, but I'll get to that in just a minute. But this is the one that you'll remember because once it gets going, it speeds up to a breakneck pace, and it never, ever lets you out of the grip of the story. In fact, it ends open-endedly. That was the only complaint about this story, but it kind of makes sense in the way that the story's told. So if you could have it end two ways. You could have the demon being killed, which then would nullify everything in the story, which would kind of exit out. Or you could have the victim killed, in which case, maybe another tape later on would pop up with the same creature. I don't know. But this one, like I said, ratchets up the gore, and it's a very breakneck sort of first-person shooter-style horror story. And I don't know why I said boarding school. The thing looks alike. I mean, the first time you see it, you just go, yeah, okay. But very bloody, very gory, definitely very intense, I'll tell you that. So, yeah, Safe Haven. One of the best stories in VHS2. And now we get to the last story. It's called Slumber Party Alien Abduction. Now, this story in particular is creepy on a number of levels. It takes that movie Signs, if you guys ever saw that with Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix. It pretty much ratchets up that idea to about a 20 and gives you that feeling of dread where you're not safe anywhere. This concerns a group of a babysitter, a babysitter, her boyfriend, couple of kids, running around what seems like an idyllic summer day, and then all of a sudden, from the sky, aliens appear. Now, this story is pretty terrifying for just a couple of reasons. One, if you're not ready for the aliens, they'll pop up, they'll startle you. Number two, the terror in this film never stops. And the only other thing that bothered me about this story is there's a little dog in the movie, and I know that the ASPCA pretty much, keeps a watch on all these animals when they do these films. But the doggy, for lack of a better term, does not make it, which means nobody makes it in this film. The gore on here is not there. It's almost no gore whatsoever. But the terror in this film or the story, it pretty much drives it. So that is, it's not a bad story, but I think it wanted to cater to the sci-fi crowd because it's like, look, horror, horror, horror. Oh, let's throw in aliens, and it works. It works because again, this story was written around the time that the alien abduction was a big thing. You hear less and less of them now, but remember back in the early 80s and 90s, you heard about, UFOs, this and that. And then Whitley Strieber comes out with that movie Communion. This story kind of pulled from, all those things. Um, like I said, this is a breakneck, alien invasion deal where nobody's really safe. So no gore on this story, but very terrifying, very disturbing, if you will. And then after this story, we jump back into the wraparound story and we see the shocking conclusion of VHS 2. Now, there is one thing I'd like to say about the gore. Whoever done the makeup and the gore for this film is amazing. Like, I think the gore in this film is more realistic than that in the first. But it's definitely worth checking out. Now, it did spawn 2 more sequels, which we will cover next week. VHS Viral and VHS 94, which I told you guys is streaming on Shudder. So if you guys are watching this too, I'm glad you guys had a happy 4th of July. Or wait, that's today. Well, most of the communities that I know of, they had their fireworks last night. And I know my local pizzeria was giving out, selling pizza by the slice, which I thought was a pretty cool idea, So I'm glad everyone made it through, and happy birthday, America, today. So if you're looking for a fairly decent sequel, check out VHS 2. It very creative, the stories, I will tell you that. Very very breakneck pace, moves a little faster than the original. And even on the unrated version, it's actually shorter than the original, which is definitely cool. And like I said, the cast of directors did a really cool job with this, and it is an unforgettable film. The only thing, again, like pros, is you got great stories, great wraparound story. The cons is not a lot of people are going to like the first-person POV sort of style that these movies are made in. And then plus you got good gore and you got disturbing stuff. The cons are, again, some of the stories don't reach, like the last story didn't reach the heights as its predecessor story. But it's a fun horror movie to watch nonetheless. And we'll be reviewing VHS Viral next week, along with VHS 94. So stay tuned. I hope you like these movies because, every movie I review, guys, I sit down and I watch and I try to give you a brief scenario. I don't like to go into much detail about them because I think talking to you guys constantly about a movie is going to make people not want to watch it. I give you the basics. I tell you, hey, check it out. And it's up to you guys if you like it or not. But I just want to take time, too, to say thank you to everybody that's been watching me. And I'm glad that I can entertain you. And I'm glad that I can, try to tell you about all this useless crap. So, for all my fans out there, for all the people who hit subscribe, I want to say thank you again. Because without you guys subscribing, I wouldn't have a channel. And I look forward to, you guys hitting play or subscribing. And that's pretty much about it. It's going to be a do-nothing day at the Warner House. So, hey, we're just going to chill out. All right, guys. Check you next week with VHS Viral.